I've been getting on some Zoom calls, and every now and then the conversation evolves into green light hitting. And green light hitting is something that we at Go Wags did for about 8 or 9 years, and it created a bunch of success for the age groups from probably 8 to 14. And the questions are always in the nature of like, how is green light hitting different than what's out there now? And one of the things that I always come back to is, the game of baseball begins with this huge amount of participants, and then the longer you play, it narrows. And then the people that get the forum to speak, they're always the experts. And the experts have this recency bias to the best in their field. So oftentimes the people that get up on stage, the people in their presence and the players that they're working with are the best in the world. And many times that message, as it permeates down into the younger levels, sometimes the message misses the mark. So when I get questions about green light hitting, what I'm always trying to do is I'm always trying to differentiate between the right message compared to the right message for the right audience. And I think those two things are different. So sometimes the right message it hits the wrong ears, and we need to be sensitive to when those things occur. So I have 5 things that I wanted to just express for these young players and their dads and their coaches as to how they can help navigate their experience. So physically, this is something I believe is true. I believe all young players should turn fast until they shouldn't turn fast. So one of the things that we were constantly trying to get our guys, our young athletes, to do is to engage their core and turn fast. When you talk to folks that train athletes, what they'll tell you is that we all evolve from the proximal to the distal, and all that means is we develop this core strength, and then this core strength sort of permeates out, and then the hands and the extremities become where the game is played at the highest of levels, where people talk about hitting with their hands and barrel awareness, and I refer to it as the precision game. But all that means is at the highest of levels, the game is played on the fingertips, out on the distal. But when you're really young, 7, 8, 9-year-olds, they don't have core strength. So we are always trying to get people to turn fast. And then eventually, when your core is unlocked and you're turning really, really fast in this rotational sport, eventually at the highest of levels, what you try to do is you try to resist that rotation. But if you tell a young kid that has never learned to turn to resist rotation, it's counterintuitive. Like, how can I resist if I can't even turn? So I think that's the first thing that we have to realize, is there does come a component where we have to get our young athletes turning fast. So turn fast until you shouldn't. Number 2 is be aggressive until you shouldn't. So at the highest of levels, pitchers know that if they don't have to throw a strike to get a guy out, they'll always take advantage of that. So the last thing you want to do at the highest of levels is be this aggressive hitter that will chase balls out of the zone, because pitchers will just feast on that. And if they don't have to throw you a strike, they won't, to get you out. But at the younger levels, what we're trying to do is we're trying to make great baseball players. We're not trying to be successful as a great baseball player. So to make great baseball players, what you want to do is you want to have them loving their sport. Well, when you're 7, 8, 9, 10s, you could go to a tournament and you could get, if you're really good, pitchers won't even throw to you. So what we wanted to do is we wanted to create what we call a smash zone, where our hitters almost had this, I don't want to say reckless in nature, because that doesn't have great connotations, but they were definitely overly aggressive, and they were hunting pitches that they could smash, and many times they weren't in the strike zone. And that was okay, because what we knew was the game evolves with the hitter, which means the 8-year-old eventually faces an 18-year-old pitcher that has also survived these challenges, and then those pitchers get better. But without pitchers that can really attack the strike zone, the last thing we wanted to do was tell our hitters, hey, only swing at strikes, because that could be a very boring existence. So be aggressive until you shouldn't. And that's something that's true with green light hitting. 3, play games until you shouldn't. So, look, we're not playing any games right now. This is an awful time to be a baseball player, to be an athlete, of course. But when you're really young, I mean, the reason you sign up for baseball is to play games. Games are fun. By their very nature, the game of baseball is a game. So, many young people don't really embrace the idea of practice. It's a struggle to get people to go out and to invest in improving themselves, because the games that we play, if you're just a beginner, the reason you signed up was to enjoy competition, not to necessarily become the greatest in that thing. But as you continue to advance, the message becomes, you got to train, you got to be deliberate in your focus. And that's true, of course, because there's no way you get to that point until you've really dedicated yourself to your sport. But at the most basic of levels, you want to play, and you just want to play as often as possible. And then you reach a point where, hey, stop always wanting to play and go invest in yourself. Spend time in the weight room. My brother says, stop racing the car, just invest in your engine. And that sort of speaks to that point. But before you can get there, you got to play games, and you got to know this is something you want to invest in. So play games until you shouldn't. 4, listen to your coaches until you shouldn't. Look, it's dangerous out there. I mean, no one has written the Bible of baseball. There's an infinite amount of pitching advice. There's an infinite amount of hitting advice. And eventually the athlete needs to own his process. Like, he's got to know what works for him. And there's a whole bunch of people out there willing to help. And we need to listen to those people, because at the beginning, we don't know much about the game of baseball. So we're trying to attach ourselves to all these people that understand what's true and what's not true. But the longer you play and the more experience you gain, hopefully your experiences teach you, and they teach you what is true and what isn't true, and what might be true for someone might not be true for me. And if I've only met a coach for a week, how can he really know what makes me tick and what's helpful? So listen to your coaches until you shouldn't. And that doesn't mean be disrespectful. That's not what I'm saying. Like, anytime you engage in competition and you have a coach of authority and a player, you always want to be respectful to that coach. But we live in this sea of information. We have to understand that ultimately the player is responsible for his actions. So the player has to listen to your coaches until you shouldn't, because at some point you got to own the process. And the last one is be a team player until you shouldn't. And what that means is you need opportunities to be great. Like, you just need opportunities. And when you first start out playing, generally the one that continues to survive is the one that continues to get opportunities. You're the shortstop, you're the shortstop, you're the shortstop, you're the shortstop. And then all of a sudden, you're the left fielder, and that's great. Like, you have to sacrifice, and you don't want to necessarily restrict yourself to just one position. You want as many tools in your tool belt as possible, right? So when you're really young, you don't want to see yourself as just relegated to an infielder or to an outfielder, or I'm just a PO. Like, that's one perfect example where people don't want to be labeled a pitcher only when they're really young. They want as many opportunities as possible. But there does come a point in your development when you got to be a little bit selfish in your progress, and you want to say, no, I appreciate that you're asking me to sacrifice, but I need to do what's in the best interest of me. And many times, what's in the best interest of me isn't what's in the best interest of the team. And you'll see, lots of people are taking advantage of the transfer portal in college. And that sort of speaks to this message is that, I think the last three Heisman Trophy winners were actually transfers. And, coaches are going to want to say sacrifice for the team, but there does come a point as a player in today's climate where you want to embrace what's true to you and what's true to what you're trying to accomplish. So be a team player until you shouldn't. So that's something I wanted to get out there. We need to be really careful about the right message hitting the right audience. And I thought this would be helpful to some folks, especially during this time.